At 18, Bride was forced to marry a fat 84-years-old duke, but on wedding night, he revealed why he chose her. Marianne Lark's hand trembled inside her white glove as she stood at the altar, 18 years old and terrified. Behind her, Uncle Silas leaned close enough that only she could hear his whispered threat. "Say the vows, girl, or your little brother loses his schooling. Say them, and smile." Across from her stood the Duke of Dunridge, Gideon Varick, decorated war hero, now heavyset and leaning on a carved cane. The church whispered about him with cruel clarity. Fat as a Christmas goose. War-wrecked. Broken. What does he need with a wife? Pity, probably. Marianne saw Gideon's jaw tighten. He heard every word. But when his eyes met hers, they held something unexpected, not desire or ownership, but wariness. Like a man bracing for a blow he'd learned to expect. She'd been sold like livestock to pay her uncle's debts. The Duke had paid handsomely, and now she was about to become his property. Hello, lovely. If you're enjoying this story of an unexpected partnership born from obligation, if you're enjoying this tale of deception, courage, and unexpected rescue, tap like, leave a quick comment, and subscribe so YouTube knows to bring you more stories you'll enjoy. And if you're up for it, tell me your first name or where you're watching from in the comments. I read every note, and it always brings a smile to my face. 1. The vows felt like stones in Marianne's mouth. I, Marianne Elizabeth Lark, take thee, Gideon Varick. She'd lost her parents to fever when she was 7. Uncle Silas had taken her and her younger brother Thomas in more investment than charity, she'd realized over the years. Thomas's schooling. Marianne's care. All carefully calculated to appear generous while keeping them dependent. Then Uncle Silas's debts had mounted. Gaming. Bad investments. Desperate borrowing. And somehow, the Duke of Dunridge had agreed to pay those debts in exchange for Marianne's hand in marriage. I pronounce you man and wife. Gideon didn't kiss her. Just offered his arm with careful formality, as if touching her required permission she hadn't given. They walked back down the aisle together, an 18-year-old girl and a man approaching 40 who carried the weight of war in his body and his silence. In the vestry, Uncle Silas cornered Gideon immediately. About the settlement, Your Grace. The final payment will be delivered as agreed. Gideon's voice was flat. Once you leave my wife alone. Your wife was my ward. Was. Past tense. Gideon's hand tightened on his cane. You have no claim on her now. None. Am I clear? Uncle Silas smiled like an eel. Perfectly, Your Grace. But Marianne saw the calculation in her uncle's eyes. This wasn't over. The wedding breakfast was mercifully brief. Aristocratic relatives congratulated Gideon with barely concealed pity. Marianne was inspected like furniture, too young, too poor, too obviously purchased. An elderly woman with a spine like iron, Lady Octavia Varick, Gideon's aunt, studied Marianne with shrewd eyes. Can you read, girl? Yes, Lady Octavia. Keep accounts. I managed my uncle's household books for 3 years. Lady Octavia's eyebrow rose fractionally. Then perhaps you're not entirely useless. We'll see. Before Marianne could respond, a stern-faced housekeeper appeared at her elbow. Your Grace. The woman's tone suggested she was testing out the title and finding it ill-fitting. I'm Mrs. Baines. The Duke's housekeeper. Perhaps you'd like to inspect the linens before the journey. Inspect the linens, Mrs. Baines repeated with the faintest hint of conspiracy. Quite urgently. Marianne understood. The woman was rescuing her from the crowd. Yes. Of course. Lead the way. In a quiet side room, Mrs. Baines spoke plainly. You'll find Dunridge House different from what you might expect, Your Grace. The Duke runs a particular sort of household. What does that mean? You'll see soon enough. Mrs. Baines's expression softened slightly. But you should know, His Grace isn't what London gossip claims. Judge him by his actions, not society's whispers. Before Marianne could ask more, Gideon appeared in the doorway. The carriage is ready. The ride to Dunridge House was silent. Gideon sat across from her, his cane resting against the seat, his expression unreadable. Marianne studied him when she thought he wasn't looking. He was heavy, yes. But not soft. His shoulders suggested strength, and his hands, scarred, capable, didn't look like they belonged to a man who'd given up. His face was harder to read. Weathered. Careful. Like he'd learned to show nothing and expect less. As they neared his estate, Gideon finally spoke. "Tonight, you'll learn the only reason I agreed to this." Marianne's breath caught. Here it came. The truth. What he'd bought her for. "I understand, Your Grace." "No." His grey eyes met hers. "You don't. But you will." The estate appeared through the window, sprawling, well-maintained, but with an odd cluster of small cottages on the eastern edge. Marianne glimpsed men working there, some missing limbs, others moving with the careful gait of the permanently injured. Veterans, she realized. Like Gideon himself. Dunridge House rose before them, stone and dignity, lit against the darkening sky. Marianne's new prison. Or her new life. She didn't know which yet. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 2. The bridal suite was beautiful and terrifying. Marianne stood in the center of the room, still in her wedding gown, as servants finished lighting candles and withdrew. A connecting door led to the Duke's chambers. She stared at it, heart hammering. This was when it happened. When her husband claimed what he'd purchased. The door opened. Gideon stood in the doorway in shirt sleeves, his cane in hand, and stopped at the threshold. "I won't cross unless you invite me." Marianne blinked. "I don't understand." "I won't touch you. Not tonight. Not ever unless you choose it." He spoke carefully, like each word cost him. "You were forced into this marriage. I won't compound that violation with another. But you're my husband. You have the right. I have no rights over your body. Ever." Gideon's voice was firm. "May I enter? To talk?" "Nothing more." Slowly, Marianne nodded. Gideon moved into the room with the careful gait of someone who managed constant pain. He gestured to 2 chairs by the fire. "Please. Sit." They sat across from each other like negotiators, not newlyweds. "You want to know why I chose you?" Gideon began. "My uncle said you needed a wife. That his debts were convenient. But not the reason." Gideon pulled a small bundle of letters from his pocket. 3 years ago, I was recovering from my final injury. The one that sent me home. I spent months in a field hospital with 50 other broken men. The worst part wasn't the pain. It was the silence. No news from home. No word about whether anyone cared if we lived or died. He held up the letters. These arrived every week. Anonymous. Written for wounded soldiers' families who couldn't write themselves. Read aloud in that hospital until the paper wore thin. They were the only thing that made us feel human. Marianne stared at the familiar handwriting. Her handwriting. "I volunteered at the parish," she whispered. "Writing letters for families. I didn't know where they went. They went to men who needed desperately to hear that someone remembered them." Gideon's voice was rough. "When I returned to London, I tracked that handwriting. It took months. I found you through the parish records. You married me because of letters. I married you because those letters showed character, compassion, practical intelligence." He set them aside. "And because I need a partner for something that matters more than society's approval." "A partner for what?" Gideon leaned forward, intensity replacing his careful reserve. "I'm turning my eastern fields into a veteran's refuge. Men who came home broken, in body or mind or both. Men who can't work regular hours or fit into normal society. I'm giving them land, work they can manage, dignity. That's wonderful. It's also expensive. And someone is stealing from the fund." His jaw tightened. "Money disappears. Supplies vanish. I need someone I can trust to help me find who's bleeding this project dry. Someone sharp enough to spot what I'm missing." Marianne's mind raced. "You want me to investigate? I want you to be my partner. My equal in this." Gideon pulled out a folded document. "But first, I want you to have choices. This is a contract. It guarantees you separate rooms, your own stipend, and the legal right to leave this marriage if you wish. With money and protection. You're giving me the power to leave you." I'm giving you the power to choose to stay. His eyes held hers. I won't keep you in a cage, Marianne. But if you choose to stay, if you choose to help me, I'll give you purpose, partnership, and respect. That's all I can offer. Marianne took the contract with shaking hands. No one had ever offered her choices before. I need time, she whispered. To think. Take all the time you need. Gideon stood carefully. There's a bolt on your door. Use it if it makes you feel safer. I'll see you at breakfast. After he left, Marianne sat alone, staring at the contract and the letters. She'd been sold. But somehow, she'd been bought by the one man in England who was offering her freedom. She didn't bolt the door. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 3. Dunridge House revealed itself slowly over the following days. Mrs. Baines ran the female staff with silent efficiency. Mr. Huxley, the butler, managed the front of house with the same martial precision Gideon probably once used in the field. Both watched Marianne with careful assessment. Her Grace will want to review the household accounts, Mrs. Baines announced on Marianne's second morning. I will. You will. It wasn't a question. The accounts were brought to Gideon's study, now technically Marianne's as well. She spread the ledgers across the desk and began reading. Within an hour, she'd found 3 irregularities. Coal deliveries charged but not received. Kitchen invoices for quantities the household couldn't possibly use. Payments authorized by someone named Calendar, the estate steward, she learned that had no clear purpose. Gideon appeared in the doorway. Finding anything? Someone's stealing from you. Systematically. His expression darkened. Show me. They worked side by side through the afternoon, Marianne pointing out discrepancies while Gideon cross-referenced against his own records. His knowledge of the estate was thorough. His anger at the theft was quiet but absolute. I trust Calendar, Gideon said finally. He came highly recommended. Then either your trust is misplaced, or he's not working alone. That evening, Gideon took Marianne to see the veterans' cottages. A dozen men lived there, some missing limbs, others bearing invisible wounds. They worked the land, built furniture, lived simply but with dignity. Jenkins lost both legs at Waterloo, Gideon said quietly, indicating a man planting vegetables with practiced ease. Army pensioned him off with barely enough to survive. Now he grows food for the whole community. It's remarkable. It's necessary. Gideon's voice was hard. The men who fought for England shouldn't be left to beg or starve. If I can give them purpose, I will. Marianne understood then. This wasn't charity. This was Gideon's mission. His reason for enduring society's mockery and living with constant pain. Back at the house, Lady Octavia cornered Marianne in the drawing room. You've been investigating the accounts. Yes, Lady Octavia. Good. Someone needed to. Gideon's too trusting. Sharp eyes assessed Marianne. Can you handle society? There's a dinner next week. Neighbors. Gossips. They'll tear you apart if you show weakness. I'll manage. See that you do. The Varick name has endured worse than an inconvenient marriage, but I won't have you embarrassing us with incompetence. That night, Marianne heard Gideon shouting in his sleep. Nightmares, she realized. The war still lived in him. She moved toward the connecting door to check on him, then froze. Someone was in Gideon's study. She heard papers rustling, drawers opening. Marianne grabbed a candlestick and crept downstairs. The study door was ajar. A figure bent over Gideon's desk, tall, well-dressed. Mr. Calendar, the steward. He was rifling through the Veterans Fund ledger. Marianne backed away silently and went to wake Gideon. They had their thief. Now they needed proof. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 4. The dinner party was a trial by aristocratic fire. Marianne wore a gown Lady Octavia had deemed barely acceptable and entered the drawing room with her chin up and her stomach churning. The guests were exactly what she'd feared, wealthy neighbors with too much time and too little kindness. They assessed her like livestock at market. So young, one woman murmured. Purchased, wasn't she? Another whispered, not quietly enough. The Duke's pity project. How charitable. Marianne felt every word like a cut, but she kept her expression serene. Mrs. Baines had coached her, "Grace under fire, your grace. Never let them see you bleed." Mr. Calendar appeared at her elbow, all polished charm. "Your grace, I found this receipt near your desk. Thought you should have it." He handed her a paper, a receipt for household goods, marked paid, but clearly forged. Marianne recognized it immediately as one of the doctored documents she'd been investigating. He was framing her, making it look like she was the thief. Before she could respond, Uncle Silas arrived, fashionably late and reeking of entitlement. "Niece." He kissed her cheek while Marianne fought not to recoil. "How domestic you look. Playing Duchess." "I am the Duchess." "Purchased Duchess," he corrected quietly. "Don't forget who made that possible." At dinner, the whispers continued. Marianne sat beside Gideon, feeling every eye on her, every word a judgment. Then Uncle Silas raised his glass. "To the happy couple. May the Duke's generosity be appreciated. And may his new family remember their obligations." It was a threat, thinly veiled. A reminder that Silas had leverage, Marianne's brother, her past, her dependence. Gideon set down his fork with deliberate calm. "Mr. Lark, you'll find my wife has no obligations to you. Our business is concluded. Your debts are paid. Your connection to this house is severed." "Surely you don't mean—" "I mean exactly what I said." Gideon's voice carried the weight of command. "My wife is not for sale. Not to you. Not to society. She's under my protection, and anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me." The room fell silent. Uncle Silas's face purpled, but he smiled. "Of course, Your Grace. I meant no offense." After dinner, Marianne retreated to the study, shaking with reaction. She'd endured the dinner, but barely. Gideon found her there, staring at the doctored receipt. "Calendar's escalating," she said. "He's trying to frame me." "I know." Gideon's jaw was tight. "I also found your uncle's name in the fund ledger. Listed as a consultant. He's part of this." Marianne's blood went cold. "Uncle Silas is helping steal from the veterans?" "It appears so. Using his connection to you as leverage." Gideon's hand found hers. "Marianne, I need to know, are you with me in this? Truly? Because what comes next will be ugly." She looked at this man who'd given her choices, who'd offered her partnership, who'd defended her publicly despite society's mockery. "I'm with you," she said firmly. "Tell me the plan. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. 5. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Gideon announced a large payment to the Veterans Fund, publicly, with witnesses, dated for the following week. The money would be transferred through Mr. Calendar's accounts, as usual. Then they waited. Mrs. Baines and Mr. Huxley were brought into confidence. Both had served Gideon long enough to be trusted completely. They positioned themselves to watch Calendar's movements. 3 days later, Calendar took the bait. Mr. Huxley found him in the estate office, doctoring the transfer records. The money had been rerouted to an account shared with Uncle Silas, proof of their partnership in theft. Gideon confronted them both with the magistrate present, the ledgers spread as evidence. "You stole from wounded veterans," Gideon said, his voice like iron. "Men who'd lost everything for their country. You stole their dignity for profit." Calendar tried to bluster. "The accounts are confused. The accounts are clear." Marianne stepped forward, her own ledger in hand. "Every false invoice. Every doctored receipt. Every payment rerouted to your private account. I've documented everything." Uncle Silas's face was ugly with rage. "You ungrateful little." "Enough." Gideon's voice cracked like a whip. "You have 2 choices. Return every penny stolen, sign over guardianship of Thomas Lark permanently, and leave England. Or face prosecution for theft and fraud." The magistrate nodded. "I'd take the Duke's offer, gentlemen. The alternative is prison." Calendar broke first, signing everything. Uncle Silas held out longer, but when Gideon added, "I have letters. Proof you've been gambling with borrowed money for years. The scandal alone will ruin whatever reputation you think you have," he crumbled. By sunset, both men were gone. Marianne stood in the study afterward, feeling hollowed out and strangely free. Your brother is safe, Gideon said quietly. His school is paid for. You're his legal guardian now. Thank you. She turned to face him. For everything. For protecting him. For what you've earned by your own courage. Gideon moved closer, his cane tapping softly. Marianne, I need to tell you something. This marriage began in force, your uncle's force, not mine, but force nonetheless. I meant what I said on our wedding night. You can leave. The contract still stands. I'll give you freedom, money, protection. And if I don't want to leave, then I need to know it's your choice. Not obligation. Not gratitude. Choice. Marianne looked at this man who'd given her more respect in 3 weeks than she'd received in 18 years. Who'd trusted her with his mission. Who'd defended her publicly and privately. Who'd offered freedom when he could have demanded obedience. I came here a prisoner, she said quietly. I'm staying as your partner. By choice. Gideon's face transformed. You're certain? I've never been more certain of anything. She smiled. Though I'm keeping my own study. Yours is too cluttered. He laughed, actual laughter, surprised and warm. Deal. 3 months later, the Veterans Refuge hosted a gathering. The cottages were full now, with more men arriving weekly. The fund was healthy, carefully managed by Marianne and audited regularly. Lady Octavia had grudgingly admitted that the young Duchess wasn't entirely hopeless. In the garden, surrounded by veterans and their families, music drifted from an amateur quartet. Gideon stood beside Marianne, his cane planted firmly, his free hand holding hers. Your Grace, Mr. Huxley appeared with his usual perfect timing. The dancing is about to begin. Gideon looked at Marianne. I'm not much of a dancer anymore. Then we'll dance carefully. She tugged his hand. Together. They moved onto the grass awkwardly, yes, with Gideon's cane and injury making grace impossible. But they moved together, Marianne steadying him, Gideon guiding her, both of them laughing when they nearly stepped on each other's feet. Later, in the quiet of the gardens, Gideon stopped walking. I need to ask you something. He reached into his pocket. Properly, this time. He knelt, with difficulty, with his cane for support, but he knelt. Marianne Lark-Varick, I once married you because I needed a partner. But I'm asking you now, will you marry me for real? By choice. As my equal and my love. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. Yes. God, yes. He kissed her then, their first real kiss, chosen and mutual and sweet. When they finally pulled apart, Marianne was smiling through her tears. You know society still calls you the fat veteran duke. Let them. I have everything that matters. If you're enjoying this story, I'd be so grateful for a like and subscribe. It helps me bring you more stories you'd love. What's that? A partner who chose me. A mission that matters. And a wife who's far braver than I'll ever be. He touched her face gently. I'm the luckiest man in England. We're both lucky. Marianne kissed him again. We found each other despite everything designed to keep us apart. In the distance, the gathering continued, veterans and families, laughter and music, community built from dignity rather than charity. And at its center, two people who'd started with nothing but obligation and built something true. Dear listeners, Marianne and Gideon proved that forced beginnings can lead to chosen love, that partnership matters more than perfection, and that real courage means offering freedom even when you desperately want someone to stay. If this story touched your heart, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more tales where unlikely marriages become lasting partnerships and love arrives through respect rather than force. Share your thoughts in the comments, your reflections make these stories richer. Until next time, may you always have the courage to choose love freely, and may someone choose you with the same fierce respect. This is a reminder that the best partnerships begin when both people decide they're worth fighting for.